So, good morning, everyone. We have 5 short sessions today. We decided to make the sessions a bit shorter because many people find looking at Zoom much more exhausting than having live face-to-face contact. Many factors are operating in our world just now that increase tension and anxiety. There is the virus itself, which brings fear of sickness and death. But clearly, for most countries, there's a big economic cost as well, with the lockdown and factories closed and so on. So that some of the predictive certainties of life seem to dissolve. Although we don't have any wish for people to suffer, from the Buddhist point of view, anything which reminds people that they're going to die is a good thing. Impermanence is a very, very profound message for us all. Our body is so vulnerable. It's easily harmed. What keeps it healthy and holds it together, we're never quite sure. On an outer level, people have ideas like getting enough sleep, eating good food, and so on. But from the Buddhist point of view, what keeps us alive basically is our karma. Karma means the patterning of experience, the experience that we call my life. What we have done in previous lives has created tendencies of perception, tendencies of responsivity, which may bring us towards making selections from the vast range of options which are around. And so each of us finds ourselves in our own life. We look around, we see other people. They have one head, 2 eyes, 1 mouth, and so on. We can recognize, oh yes, these are human beings. But the choices they make about their life seem often difficult to understand. Why would they do that? And of course, when they look at us, they're probably thinking the same. But what we choose is familiar and feels right. This sense of the simple givenness of my life. This is how I am. This is, how my life has unfolded. This seems just very ordinary, nothing to think about. But we're going to die. And when we die, all of what we call my life will vanish. If we have family to inherit the things we leave, it's unlikely that they will attribute the same value to the objects that we have collected. Who will want my beloved books? So in that way, we can see I have constructed a little igloo, and death is like a rapid climate change. The ice blocks melt and there is nothing much left. While I'm alive, my home, my possessions, my body, all seems quite reliable. And we can try to manage our tensions and anxieties with various kinds of relaxation, with exercise, with distractions, and so on, so that we can maintain the illusion that my life will just pretty much continue as it does. But our life has built-in obsolescence. We don't know when it's going to vanish. And therefore, using the familiar as a reassurance of the continuity of what we take ourselves to be is probably unwise. And this, of course, brings us to the basic Buddhist topic of refuge. What shall we take refuge in? When we are young, we can take refuge in our attractiveness and our health and vitality. But as we get older, we realize, oh, that was not really me. That was patterns of energy manifesting through this embodiment, and I took them to be who I am. But now I don't have so much access to them. So whether it's outer possessions or the state of our body or the information that we've learned through our education, our relation situation, if we have children or whatever, all of these factors change. This life is not safe. If we're living in Europe, it's very easy to believe that actually life is safe. We don't have war at the moment. Most people can find a place to stay. We can find enough food to eat each day. So danger seems to lie in accidents, that something terrible happens to deprive us of this life which is ours. But when we start to become interested in the teachings of the Buddha, we're encouraged to put this view into question. In his first teachings, the Buddha pointed out that the suffering is not some accident that happens, but it is inherent in being alive inside this state of limitation we call samsara. We are open to all kinds of diseases and collapses of our internal organs and so on. Our situation is unstable, and this is because we are not a thing. We are processes. Our life is dynamic. Our life is a ceaseless experience of movement. As we know, on a very basic level, if the blood stops circulating in our body, we are going to start moving towards death. If we stop breathing, we're moving towards death. Life is movement. It is the movement of the 5 elements and the many factors of our environment operating through us, as us, that is called life. On an ordinary level, a lot of the tensions we carry inside ourselves are because of our resistance to seeing how dynamic we are. Psychologically, we want to be in charge of our life. Socially, we're required to be in charge of our life. When you're a child, as you get older, each year there are new things you have to take responsibility for. Washing your hands, tidying your bedroom, doing your homework, preparing your school bag for the next morning. And then when you become an adult, there are so many things you're responsible for. This becomes something we get used to. But we are actually moving creatures, changing inside a changing world. So the demand that we become efficient and reliable is a demand to be other than this dynamic, interactive interface that we actually are. Sometimes I talk with people on Skype, and sometimes the connection is not very good. And it's not uncommon for people to apologize for the quality of the connection of the computer. They are not electronic engineers. They just own a computer. And they pay their money to the connective company. But they say, oh, I'm sorry, the connection is not very good. When we hear these things, we can take them as an indication of how much over responsibility people carry inside. Modern life requires a lot of efficiency, or at least the illusion of efficiency. So we tend to tense up. We have to hold it together, be on top of events. And so instead of just moving in the movement as the movement, we act against the currents of life. And then it is as if the outer events are arising as an enemy attacking my life. I'm under attack. Some people don't like to open their letters in case there's another bill to pay. When we feel that the world is against us, it's difficult. Even in Europe these days, there's a sense in some countries that some neighboring countries are the enemy. There's a fear of military invasion from old enemies, a fear of invasion by refugees, a fear of not getting enough of the money available in the European Union. So we have to check out what are other people getting. Is it fair? The thing about this kind of mood is that it brings our energy up to the surface. We are looking out at events, and these events are always changing. So there is always something new to think about. And so there is day by day some kind of excitation which goes on. What will happen? We don't know. Does anyone know? Maybe not. So for that reason, it's difficult to be relaxed. And then along comes the virus, something we can't see. something which for some people is very serious, even deadly. So what shall we do with that information? From the Dharma point of view, we can simply reflect, I have a body, or I am this embodiment, and I don't know how long it will last. When this body ends, that's not the end of me. I will be reborn somewhere else. How that rebirth will arise will depend on my activity. This is because, as I was indicating earlier, we identify with what we do. I am the doer of my life. I am the agent, the one that makes things happen. And it is this identification with the patterns of movement which is the basis of what we call karma. Later today, we'll be looking more we'll be looking more directly at the nature of the mind, and that the mind itself is never involved in any activity. But our ego self has very little access to this open awareness. This is not because open awareness is hidden, it's not hidden at all, but we are preoccupied with what is arising as the content of our mind. The ego is content of the mind. It's not that I am doing the thinking and the acting, but actually the thinking and the acting generates and supports and maintains the illusion that I exist as a substantial entity. Our ego seems to be the very center of us. I am happy, I am sad, I am hungry. When we say these things or think and feel these things, they seem to express a fundamental truth of who we are. I am the center. But when we look at this I, it's always dissolving. I'm tired. This is true. Then I have a rest. Then I'm not tired. I'm thirsty, which is true. Then I drink, and it's not true. Transient patterns, which have a validity in their immediacy as to how they arise, show what they are just as they are. But we bring this, or we are under the power of this extra ingredient, the reference point of I, me, myself. And this creates a kind of obscuration to the actuality of what is occurring. Our body is in a dialogue with the environment, as are our emotions and our thoughts and memories. How we seem to feel and think is evoked by the shifting patterns of circumstance. So taking refuge in ourself is to take refuge in an illusion, because this self will reinvent itself endlessly. It does anything in order to put itself at the center of the show. It has no internal content of its own and no dignity, because it changes its story all the time. So what this would indicate is that taking refuge in the outer factors of the world is not wise. Taking refuge in the formation of our body is not so wise. And taking refuge in our ego sense of self is also not so wise, because all of these are structurally unreliable. They are impermanent, and they only appear permanent if we are willing to be deluded. So we become addicted to abstractions. We see in many countries the rise of nationalism, in which it appears that there is some essentialized truth of America or Britain or Poland, which allow politicians to say ridiculous things like, Poland is Poland. People think, yes, Poland is Poland. This is like having a double shot of vodka. Makes you excited, but also a little bit crazy. That is to say, we can believe in empty signifiers. And when we do that, we have to keep filling the name of Britain or Poland with ideas and memories and national pride in order to fill it out. But of course, Poland is in many ways an idea, and people have different ideas about the idea of Poland. Poland is a process of interpretation. Each person is inventing and creating and believing in their own notion of the truth of Poland. That is to say, there is not a self-existing Poland, but the word Poland allows our wonderful capacity for imagination and creativity to invent for ourselves our own Poland, although nationalistic governments don't like to accept that this is the case. So this is the same with us. We have a name. Our name seems to indicate something enduring in time, but the actuality of our existence is being created or invented or imagined moment by moment. If you stay present with the actuality of this, you become aware, oh, I am a flow of experience. And because this flow of experience is flowing in an ever-changing world of other factors, I cannot guarantee how I am going to be even 5 minutes from now. So I'm open as a potential. Now, just as we have nationalism with countries, we have narcissism with individuals. Narcissism is when we develop a fixed image of how we are and try to maintain it. It is a persona, a mask, a reflection, and it covers the actuality of our ever-changing presentation. So when we start to look in this way, and everything that I've said so far is not an invitation to some new dogmatic belief, but rather an invitation to inquire, is this true? You have your life, you have your mind, you look for yourself. Oh yeah, I am unreliable. So when we really see this, that there is suffering and unpredictability and a lack of real existence or inherent existence in ourselves and in everything we encounter, and then we start to see that all these signifiers or factors that we might want to hold on to are actually not going to endure. They are impermanent. So what can I hold on to? Oh, in Buddhism, generally, we begin by taking refuge in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. We believe that the Buddha had an awakening. That is to say, he awoke from his intoxication with beliefs about existence. He woke from the dream of images about the world, and he stayed simply present with how it is. That is to say, he didn't add any extra ingredients, not adding hopes, not adding fears, not having hopes and plans for the future, not having regrets or sentimental attachment to events from the past. He stayed with the clean, fresh flavor of how it is. And in that moment of awakening, he could see directly, I am not who I think I am. I am, but not as an entity. The ground or the basis or the essence of the Buddha is inexpressible. It cannot be caught in language. Although we use the word Buddha as if we knew what it referred to, and you might have in your house some statue of the Buddha, or books of things said by the Buddha, books about the Buddha. None of these is the actual Buddha. Buddha is a presence which is not a thing. So when we take refuge in the Buddha, we take refuge in no thingness. But this absence of any thing which is Buddha is not a nihilistic interpretation or idea, because the Buddha manifests, was able to talk and walk and interact with people. Buddha is a showing, but not the showing of anything. The danger for us is that we pull the Buddha into our existing frame of reference, and then we think we know what we're talking about when we talk about the Buddha. He was born in India 2,500 years ago. He did this, he did that. Now we know where we are. The Buddha is a better form of me. So when we hear about that we have Buddha potential, if I get awaken to my Buddha potential, I'll just be a better James. This is a subtle way of remaining in delusion. In the Bible, it says that God made man in his image. But of course, we might think, no, actually, man made God in man's image. And we have the same issue with the Buddha. Each of us can make our own Buddha and highlight the features we like and be less attentive to the features we don't like. Especially nowadays, when we hear, oh, the Buddha was a monk, that probably encourage us to want to become monks or nuns. So we make our own edition, limited edition of the Buddha. This is how it occurs when we remain within our own frame of reference. When we start to see this, then we can recognize, oh, I need to dissolve my frame of reference if I am ever going to meet the Buddha. Otherwise, the Buddha I meet will just be my Buddha. Just as in your family and friends, you have your notion of who people are. Your siblings may have different ideas about your mom and dad. That sometimes leads to fights and feuds in families. People take sides about how much additional support one sibling should get over another. And each person believes that they really can see the truth of that person. Listen, your brother's not doing very well. He has these problems. No, he's lazy and self-indulgent. No. When we start to see this as our own mental operation, we see this double edge or double move, which is our imagination. Our imagination can help us to construct images which open new pathways, or it can start to concretize as a fixed identification of who someone or some country, some food actually is. Knowledge can be useful, but it can also be a great prison, that it seems to represent itself as a truth. So when we come to study Dharma and Buddhist understanding, we have to watch how much of our own positioning, our own beliefs, our own longings we project onto the Dharma. Buddhism, like every other religion, has different sects. Over the years, people started to disagree about various propositions regarding emptiness or methods of practice and so on. And this can easily lead to intolerance, because your idea about the Dharma is not only wrong, but poisonous. And if you present that view, you're going to corrupt other people. So you get more separation. Sometimes there are persecutions, and certain forms of belief were prohibited because open inquiry is unpopular. So this indicates life is a work in progress. If you're in Warsaw, you can take a train to Krakow, but there is no train available to the truth. Truth is an arena of interpretation on a relative level. On the absolute or the raw and uncooked level, the truth cannot be set out as something. So in the Western tradition, we had the story of how Socrates, who was a great ironic inquirer into false constructions of thought, was accused of being a corrupter of youth, because some people, young people, became upset that he didn't agree with their ideas. And this led to Socrates drinking some poisonous hemlock and dying. That is to say, when the search for truth becomes dogmatic, truth is in danger. So the second arena of refuge is Dharma. The word Dharma has many different meanings. It means phenomena, and it means really the truth of phenomena. We live in a world of appearances. What are they? We can rely on names. We say this is a house, this is a man, this is a woman. But this is a name, this is an interpretation, an identification. So when we study Dharma, we study different approaches and methods for freeing ourselves from our intoxication with reliance on concepts. So, for example, if you have a female body and you see someone who you recognize, oh, that's a woman, that seems a definite bit of truth. We already say she is a woman. The gender comes into our grammatical structure. But what does it mean to be a woman? If you are a woman, you can start to unpack that for yourself. You probably will find you have many different ideas about being a woman. And some of these may be contradictory. So again and again, Dharma is a way of seeing the dynamic potential or creativity which gets sealed into compartments by our over-reliance on concepts. That is to say, we think we know what is going on by apprehending, by taking hold of the phenomena as they arise and putting them into our conceptual boxes. But luckily for us, the world is so vital and alive and dynamic, it bursts out of these boxes. In the third area of our basic refuge is the Sangha. Sangha means those who flow together, who associate. That is to say, those who are interested in awakening. In this world and in the 6 realms of samsara, there's not so many people looking for awakening. Cows are looking for grass. Many birds are looking for worms. Human beings are looking for excitement or peace or a drink. In order to look for awakening, one has to first see that this world is a dream. But when we are merged into our frame of reference, as far as we know, cows are just being cows. They don't seem to suffer some neurotic concern about how good they are at being a cow. On one level, that's quite peaceful. However, it means they are not able to put into question the basic assumptions they have about their identity. To enter the Dharma and to join the Sangha means that you're willing to see that you make mistakes, that you're confused about life, that you get lost. You're not sure how to live. What will I do with my life? What does it mean to be happy? What does it mean to long for something I don't have? The entry ticket for the Sangha is to be ill at ease, to be questioning that somehow the world doesn't make sense. So on an ordinary level, when we start to have a sense of this, it increases our tension. We find we can't be complacent and fall asleep in our assumptions. We start to question and look. But paradoxically, in the general approach to Buddhism, it's exactly through increasing this uncertainty and its corresponding tension that we open the door to seeing how things actually are and thereby finding peace. Okay, let's take a break for 20 minutes. So maybe we just do a little quiet sitting. Sit in a relaxed way with your skeleton holding your weight. When we sit in this way, we have no particular intention or agenda. We're just here. Many things come and go, thoughts, feelings, and so on. We don't need to do anything with them. If you find yourself identifying with something which arises and you go with it for a while, as soon as you're aware of that, just be here. The less effort, the better. Okay, so usually we do this also with the eyes open into the space in front of us. If that's difficult, you can keep your eyes down the line of the nose, and you can do it with your eyes closed as well. But you probably get more experience if your senses are open. Okay. Okay. There are many aspects to this simple kind of sitting. An important one is impermanence. We become aware that our thoughts and feelings are passing through, that what we take to be our body is also a display of sensations, that body and voice and mind in terms of memories and thoughts, is all dynamic and flowing. Our tendency is to take hold of things through our knowledge, and this knowledge fixes things. And the fixing also, of course, hides various aspects. It hides the ungraspable presence that we are. For example, this weekend, I would have been in Poland. I would have been able to see the beautiful shining faces of many people there who I love. But due to the virus, I can't be there. So I could maintain some memory of the different people, and I could try to keep it fresh by freezing it inside myself, so that, oh, yes, that's how they are. I like this about them. But then hopefully we will meet again in the future, and they will not be who I remember them being. My representation of them will be a cover-up for the actuality of how they are in that moment. So how do we keep people fresh inside us without freezing them? We have to keep them in our heart, where we are in touch with their potential rather than some frozen image of how they were at one time. Catching people is not so wise. We always escape from capture. We are not who we think we are, and we are not who other people think we are. So when we start to engage with the approach of Dzogchen, we start to release ourselves from the habit of thinking about people. To think about someone is to think about your memory of them, your image of them, but in their living presence, they are not an idea. This is the central thing we'll be looking at today, and that we always look at, which is the difference between the actuality of appearance, of the phenomena, which is revealed through our senses as light and sound and touch and smell, all of which are shifting, as against our imagination of knowing what something is, what it tastes like, or what somebody's voice sounds like. In English, we have to say what it sounds like. So we're comparing it to some kind of image. And so our point of reference is not the immediacy of what is there, but some kind of concept we built up. So it's the same with Dharma. Often in the refuge, we take, having done refuge in the three jewels, we take refuge in Guru, meditation, deity, and Dakini, and then refuge in three aspects of the Buddha, the Dharmakaya, Sambhogakaya, and Imanakaya. And most of the time, what we're doing is we're taking refuge in words and ideas that we don't really understand. That's not very useful. You can study Dharma a lot and know many things about Dharma, but our life is short. We don't need to be scholars of Buddhism. The Buddha spoke in order to help people find freedom. Freedom from what? From their ideas about themselves and the world. Conceptual interpretation creates a parallel world. In Dzogchen, we are concerned with the immediate presencing of our life. This is not revealed by thinking about it. To think about it is to conceal it. Therefore, we want to relax our habitual engagement with concepts as if they were a vehicle for truth. So we take refuge in the mind itself. This is not an idea about the mind. It's about allowing ourselves to be present in and as the mind itself. The mind is always full of experience. things of the past, the future, what's happening now, inside the body, outside, and so on. All of this is the content of the mind. When you look at a tree, that is your mind. Now, if you start from the belief that your mind is inside your body and the tree is outside, then what I just said is stupid. But if you simply look at the tree, as you open yourself to the tree, you're receiving the light coming from the sun off the leaves and branches and in through your eyes. The tree reveals itself to you. This is what you receive. You don't need to think about the tree, you receive the tree. This is as close as we get to the tree as tree. But once I start thinking about the tree and comparing the shade of leaves on this tree with the next tree, what I experience is the tree as me. I hide the tree from myself by my knowledge of what the tree is. Now, this is the central problem in meditation. Our mind is here. Without the mind, we don't have any experience. And yet, for many people, it's difficult to relax and open and just be present. We find ourselves caught up in a commentary about what is occurring. We develop an intention to be more focused. We regret that we get a bit distracted. That is to say, an event happens, it seems to impact us, and we think about it. We judge it. The judgment is the energy of the mind being put into what occurred in a way that gives it more solidity and gravity. I want to stay open, but I keep following after these thoughts. This interpretation is of no help in the practice. The fact is, you were sitting, your mind was a little bit open, then you got lost, then you became aware you got lost. Now lost is gone. You're here. But you stop yourself being here because you're thinking about, why did I get lost? This is how we waste time in practice. Just want to let it be. So in the tradition, the Dzogchen tradition, we want to see what is the basis for our experience. Many different teachings exist, but they all point to the ground. Sometimes it is called the base or the source. We have to remember this is outside of language. So when we hear a word like ground, we don't want to take a literal sense of it. It's not a source in that oranges come from Spain. We don't grow oranges in England, so we have to get them from where they grow. There is Spain and England. Spain is plus oranges, England is minus oranges. So a lot of our life is like that. Things are coming to us from somewhere else. We go from here to somewhere else. But the ground or the source or the foundation is not a place. It doesn't have a location inside some topology, some geographical arena, and nor is it located in the sequence of past, present, and future. Location and duration and height and depth, all are appearances within the arena of the source. So everything is arising at once, arising at once out of this open ground. I was drinking some medicine for my throat, and now it's stealing my voice. So now I take some more medicine. This is one of the special qualities of getting old. It's a life of medicine. So the ground source is the absence of substance. Nothing comes from nothing. This is a very interesting saying because it was greatly of concern for early Greek philosophers. On the basis of that, they imagined there must be some primal substance or later some God, some active source that sends things out like a factory. Because we don't live in a world of nothing. We have something everywhere. The something is an idea. From the point of view of Dzogchen, the ground is nothing, and it effortlessly displays nothing as appearance. The ground is unborn. It hasn't come into existence as something somewhere. And here we are talking about the ground of ourselves, the basis of our mind, of our life. The more in our daily life we are sure that we see motor cars and houses and loaves of bread, that the world is full of stuff, and I also am someone, we look for some substantial origin to that, which is why in the practice that we'll do more of later, we always do our best not to start from within our conceptual castle. We start from space, and space allows us to get some felt sense of this unborn openness. This nothing is not dead. It is the great mystery that all appearance, all experience arises from the ground. There is no other source. Now, if in your street there is a Fiat car, then it comes from a Fiat factory. And a Ford car comes from a Ford factory. We are used to conceptualizing the specificity of the object in relation to the specificity of the source. But the Ford car is a Ford car for you because you call it a Ford car. The cat that is sleeping under the parked car doesn't know whether it's a Ford or a Rolls-Royce. That is to say, if you're a cat, these kind of conceptual elaborations are of no significance. The Ford is a Ford because it's not a Fiat. There is no essential Fordness to the Ford. Ford is a name put onto this appearance, just as James is a name put onto my appearance. There is no James essence inside me. This is something that is very helpful for you to investigate again and again. Because as long as you believe that you have a personal essence, which is truly definitive of you, and indeed that this personal essence is the guarantor of the truth of your identity as you, then the infinite open ground is rather threatening. How can I be me if I'm coming out of emptiness? Emptiness must be wrong, because I'm me. This is undeniable. I'm not stupid. This is why we have to observe ourselves in the flow of experience of being ourselves, cooking, walking, talking, and so on. I am movement. This movement is always changing. There is no essence of me. When I have a thought, it comes to me. I may think, oh, that must be my thought because somehow I'm thinking it. But if I'm eating an apple, it doesn't mean I'm an apple tree. I'm eating the apple, I'm thinking the thought comes to me, the apple comes from the tree. Oh, these experiences which are arising. They are movement. This is the first step to freedom, to see everything is in movement. So I am not the owner of qualities. I can think of myself as a thing and describe myself in terms of nouns. But of course, noun means name. And the name is something which is applied from the outside. It's not a description of an essence which exists, but it is the invitation to believe in the essence that you are imputing. So if we want to practice Dzogchen, we have to become used to observing the theater of our mind, of the way in which thoughts, feelings, sensations arise and move together, creating the illusion of substance. So if we go back to the ground itself, as many of you will know, it's described in some texts as having 5 main, you could say, qualities, or there are 5 statements which are true about it. Now, of course, there is a problem because the ground is beyond concept, beyond language, but we, as human beings, are trapped inside the matrix of language. So we have to try to hear the presentation of this unfolding of the ground in as light a way as possible. You want to try to hear the words as if you were in a wonderful perfumery and you have your little cardboard stick and you put some of the perfume on it and then you wave it under your nose. Various little fine tones of the scent are coming out, something woody, something of the forest, some vanilla, and so on. The last thing you need to do is to identify the perfume and stick a name on it. The scent is showing you it's in its death, and it's dissolving into the air. So this is how we want to try to hear this description of how the ground is. The first aspect, it said, is to be uncompounded. Means it's not a construct. It's not composed of bits brought together. It's not a composite. We can say the whole is greater than the sum of its parts. The ground is beyond summation. You can't totalize it by adding up all the different feeling tones you might have about it. That is to say, you can't come to a conclusion about it. When you think about something, or at school you have to write an essay, you come to the conclusion. The work comes to an end. What we are looking at together is Dzogpa Chenpo, the great completion. This means this is a completion that has never been completed. It's not the end product of some mental activity. It is whole and complete from the very beginning. The ground is as it is, and everything which arises from the ground is as it is. And because it is complete as it is, it doesn't need anything to be done to it. It doesn't need improvement, anything to be added or subtracted. This is not good news for the ego. This is the letter from the manager saying you are unemployed, because the ego's employment is to create and to fabricate and to compare and contrast and to judge. So uncompounded means without construction. And what this also means is without constructor. There is no God which has made this. The second term that's used is very similar. It's Rongjung, which means self-arising or self-present or intrinsically present. We might translate it as just is. So this is like a tired parent of a 5-year-old child. The child keeps asking questions. Why? And the parent said, it just is. It just is. Nothing to say, nothing to think about. It's like this. Come on. It's like this. So this is an invitation to relax. There's nothing more to find. You're not a detective. You're not examining the site of the crime for some evidence. All across the world, there are physicists looking for the origin of the universe and mathematicians looking for the unitary theory and so on. So in Dzogchen, say, there's nothing wrong with having a sharp mind, a mind which can have a penetrating insight that helps to penetrate the veils of obscuration. But the ground itself is never obscured. And so if you keep inquiring into it, your own thoughts, your human karmic thoughts, will in fact not bring more clarity, but more obscuration. And this is important when we sit in meditation. There is nothing for you to do except be there with how it is. If you turn it into a problem that should be solved, then you will find a lot of work to do. But it just is. So, however your mind is, let it be like that. But it shouldn't be like that. I don't want it to be like that. I think other people have better things happening for them. These are all wrong roads. They are interesting roads, but they take you away from how it is. Because instead of the simplicity of the clarity of presence, being with it, you're going into your imagination and thinking about it. You're in thought production, interpretation production. So the third quality is infinity or boundlessness, infinite depth, infinite expanse. It has no top or bottom or limit. Everything we encounter, whether it's dogs or sausages, has a shape, has a location, which means that it has a particular domain in relation to the surrounding environment. And this makes it available for comparing and contrasting. But this infinite openness doesn't stand in relation to anything else. You can't catch it with a concept and then hold it on the one hand like this, on the other hand like that. So you can see that concepts are like small pots. They hold certain items and reject other items. So if you have the pot of the orange, you can't put your toothbrush in it. Only oranges fit in the pot of the orange. And in fact, the pot of the orange is defined by the absence of the toothbrush. Each seeming thing or entity is both seemingly self-defined, inherently defined, and defined by the exclusion of all that is not it. So all of us have a little pot of me. And into the me pot, we put the things that feel like me, and we try to keep out the things that are not me, including the virus. But if the virus comes into your pot, it's now part of your pot. That's why the ego is always a bit paranoid, trying to defend its boundaries, taking in the things that confirm it and keeping out the things that don't confirm it. So hopefully you can see, if I sit in my ego pot, that is to say, if I enter the meditation as me inside my habitual frame of reference, then I won't be able to have any access to this openness. I have to let go of what I have. And we'll experience this directly later today when we do the Guru Yoga. Then the fourth quality is that it's inexpressible. We can't catch it with our concept and we can't express it with our words. This doesn't mean that it's not available. It is available, but not through the pathway that we have got used to. You have to enter into that mode. So, for example, if you've been working all day, maybe on computers, and then you go to play with a child of 3, you have to completely shift your organization. All day long, you had to know what was going on. But with a child of 3, you don't know what's going on. The rules of the game change a lot. And you have to relax into the feeling tone of play. You're with the emergence of what is going on. You get bored if you know what the game is. Small children are good at knowing what the game is and not knowing what the game is at the same time. that's what keeps it fresh. So when you take them to the park and put them on the swing, they say, do it again, do it again. Well, we've already been doing it for 10 minutes. No, just some more, I like it. I want to do it again. Let's do it again. So how come the child is not getting bored? Because they can find the freshness. They are not so much in the world of accumulation, of building up pictures. So this is what language does. It layers things over. So when we say this is beyond language, if you find yourself in the practice going into commentary about what's going on, you try to recognize that you are turning your back on the open door. And the fifth aspect is called that this ground is beyond the categorizations of samsara and nirvana. It's neither limited nor freed. So in order to make ourselves available, we have to recognize how we make ourselves unavailable. There's nothing wrong with thought, but the world of thought has certain parameters, certain functional limits, and it cannot give you access to the open ground. As C.R. Lama used to say, you cannot think your way out of samsara. This is why we have the meditation practice. Okay, so we have a break now for 20 minutes. Okay. So now we have some sense of the ground, that we are already in this ground, that we are the blossoming of the ground, the play of the ground. Part of that play is the arising of all that we know, our capacity to think and judge and so on. Of course, the energy of the ground arises in a very precise form. Each thing is as it is. It's not all mixed up in a pot. Just as the rays of light that come out of the sun are very precise. They go in a straight line, maybe a little bent from gravity and so on, but they have their own integrity. So the ground, the whole, has the integrity of being undivided. But this doesn't mean homogenized. The diversity of experience, whether it's feelings or perceptions or sensation, this diversity is not in opposition to the integrity of the whole. That is to say that diversity doesn't split the whole. So this is very important for us to see, because usually things are organized in our mind as either or. Either it's clear or it's not clear. But to support ourselves in understanding this, if we go back to the Heart Sutra, in this text, which is arising from a conversation, a teaching, it's shown that if you take these seemingly oppositional categories, form and emptiness, which we could represent in ordinary language as something or nothing, they seem to be very clearly oppositional and mutually excluding. Something is not nothing and nothing is not something. But the text shows us that form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Moreover, form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness is not other than form. It means there is no aspect of any form, whether it's a human body or a cat or a motor car, there is no aspect of that absolutely seeming palpable thingness which is other than empty. That is to say that the cat is an appearance without the thingness of a cat. There is no essence of cat. The cat is breathing and eating and pissing and so on. It's walking, it's climbing and so on. It is a movement within the environment. You cannot separate the cat from the environment. It is part of the world. But when we think of the cat, our concept of cat seems to create a circle around this animal, which holds it all by itself and apart. This is an activity of our mind. The cat has never been born. It has been born only from our mind as our imagination. Now, again, you might think, well, James is crazy. The cat came out of the mother's body. The female cat got pregnant, and gradually inside was growing the kittens, and they came out of the body. And they came out as separate things. If they were not breathing, they would be dead. And if they were dead, they would be outside. And at nighttime, maybe a rat comes and eats them a bit, and then some maggots go into the body. So what we call a cat is a mode of the world showing itself. There's not two things, the world plus cat. So I'm looking at this screen and I see some people's faces. That is you. Whereas I am me. But the reason that I'm talking is because of you. You sit there looking at me and you're like fishermen. And your little hook comes out of you and goes into me and pulls the words out. Because although sometimes I'm a little bit strange, I don't generally spend my Saturday looking at the computer and talking to it. This is our life. It is manifesting together. We are already on the inside. Ignorance means to ignore the fact that we are on the inside and to imagine that we are on the outside as separate beings. So the ground is always open. It's never blocked. It cannot be covered. But arising from it, as the texts say, like some magical phenomena, there are two pathways, one of awareness of the ground and the other of non-awareness of the ground. When we have awareness of the ground, we see directly, I emerge from space. What I call myself is the manifesting moment by moment of the energy of the ground. The world is emergent. It's not established. So generally in Buddhism, when we talk about impermanence, this is what we're talking about. There's nothing to grasp hold of. Impermanence, emptiness, co-emergence, these are all ways of trying to describe something which is, in a sense, indescribable. The fact of this all-togetherness, this emergence altogether out of nothing. Nothing shows itself as nothing something. So nothing something is exactly the point of the Heart Sutra. So sound silence, taste tasteless. Everything is together, but not as a separated thing. Everything is unborn and yet appearing. So there are many familiar examples for this, which most of you will know. When you see a rainbow in the sky, on one level it's reasonable to say, there is a rainbow. We talk of it as if it was a something, but it's a patterning of colors arising due to the play of light and the specks of water on the edge of the cloud. The rainbow is something nothing. The same with a mirage that you might see on a road in the summer. The same with the reflection of the full moon in a pond of water. There is something nothing. You would not be very well if you couldn't see the moon in the water, because it's there and it's not there. And so I am James and not James. The identification of James or moon in the water or rainbow seems to indicate a somethingness. But we find that our somethingness is very quickly shifting and moving with circumstances. In my life, I have done many things. This has only been possible because I am nothing. If I was something, then so many experiences would have been impossible. So I've been happy, sad, in love, in despair. So many emotions have come, which in their somethingness seem to be me. But because of their nothingness, they went. The richness of my life is because there is nothing behind it. So when I used to see many different patients for therapy, each patient got a different therapy, depending on how they were, how I was, what arose between us. Going for therapy is not like going to buy 100 grams of cheese. It's not a thing. I'm not giving someone something, but we find ourselves engaged in an exploration of the possibilities of the situation. With different people, we find ourselves, we know this ourselves, we find ourselves able to speak or not speak. So it's not that you are showing yourself, unless you're being quite artificial. But if you're chatting with a friend, you find yourself speaking. Their presence and the mood which arises between you evokes your posture, your gestures, your way of speaking, your vocabulary, and so on. This is the presence of the open ground. The ground is not something somewhere else. It's the basis of every moment of your life. You are the showing of the ground, of the potential of the ground. This potential is not preformed, but it very quickly emerges, into the moment. So awareness or rigpa is to be open to the ground, to be aware of the ground. Now we have to be very clear about what this means. So you could say I'm aware that it's a bit cold in the room I'm sitting in. So it is as if there is an object, the temperature of the room, and I have some awareness of this quality. So we have the familiar linguistic structure, subject, verb, object. I am aware that the room is cold. But this is more consciousness. These are only words, but we have to sort of separate them slightly to get some precision. I'm conscious of the temperature in the room, and this consciousness is luminous for me due to the illumination of awareness. So it's as if the consciousness of the temperature of the room is like a reflection arising in the mirror. The mirror is empty of self-content, but it's available as a space of display and also as an illumination of the display. Now, often we are somewhat merged into our experience. Oh, it's a bit cold. Oh, I feel cold. So this is real. Oh, yeah, it's cold. But this is an arising. This is an experience which is revealed through the clarity of awareness. But when I merge into the intensity of the experience of the cold, there is a kind of closure in my capacity to experience the openness of the ground. And that blinds me to the fact that awareness of the ground is the facilitation of the luminous space of experience. So, and we'll look more in after we have the break for lunch, but the more we see the ground, the more we're open to the ground, the more the luminosity of experience becomes apparent. Although the ground is not something we can see, in a sense, we see it by seeing through it. And this seeing through it is the clarity which reveals whatever may be arising within it. So our awareness has these three aspects. It reveals the essence of the mind, which is emptiness, that there is nothing there to get. And because it's nothing, it doesn't lack anything. Nothing can be added to it or taken away. It's just open. And because it's open, it can be filled. And from morning to night and in our dreams, it's filling and emptying, filling and emptying. So sometimes this is talked of in terms of these two aspects of Dzogchen: the indestructible, unborn, ungraspability is referred to as primordial purity. That is to say, it can't be marked in any way. I can take my pen and make some writing on a piece of paper. But if I move the pen around in the air in front of me, it doesn't leave any mark. The air moves around due to the volume of my hand, but after a moment, it's gone, no trace. So the primordial purity means simply that no matter what has happened, right from beginningless time, whatever events have arisen, there is no trace on the primordial ground. This is the undefiled basic purity of all sentient beings. Whatever karma you do, whatever activity which takes you into a human body or the hell realms or the God realms, none of this makes any mark on the basic openness of your mind. Your mind is always fresh, naked, available, but the patterning of your thoughts is not. The patterning of thought, impulse, intention, somatic identification that you take to be myself, this arises in context and seems to establish something real, something true, enduring. This is why we have karma, because there is something to be marked. So if I'm wearing a shirt at the end of the day, I want to put it down for washing because it accumulates sweat and bits of dried skin and dust from the air and so on. That is to say that this marks that. When you cook your food, some bits of dried food are in the pan and you have to wash it carefully. The same with the plates after you've eaten. So samsara is the domain of marking. If you are in the upper God realms, you are marked by pleasure. If you are in the lower hell realms, it's marked by suffering and torment. The object is coming onto the subject and the subject says, no, ow. So this is marking. When we feel some pain, we tense in our muscles. Our breathing changes. We don't want that to happen. If you get a headache, you don't want to go out to a party. The mark of the headache makes you unavailable to be with other people when there's a lot of noise and maybe flashing lights. So this is what we're familiar with. This is to be a sentient being in samsara. But the basis of our experience is unmarked. So if you do tantric practice, you might visualize Dorje Sempa, Vajrasattva, and do purification in that way. Although it's difficult for us to wash out our own limitations, this is not difficult for Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva means Vajra being, indestructible being. This is the primordial ground. Vajrasattva has never been contaminated by anything. So he is like a mother with a small child. The child falls over and he starts to cry. And the mother says, here, come, I kiss it better. The injury was not very serious. A kiss and a cuddle is enough medicine. So we either think, oh, I'm a very bad person. I am a great sinner. I've hurt so many people. Dorje Sempa says, hey, baby, come here. Come on. Don't worry about this too much. Then it's all gone. And in some of the practices, at the end of the practice, you repeat this line, which he says, now all the impurities are removed. You are pure as you were in the very beginning. But we don't believe it. That's why we do it 100,000 times. And still we don't believe it. Now that's quite remarkable. I know more about me than you do, Vajrasattva. You need to improve the formula of your washing powder. In that way, you can be attached to shit when you are offered gold. So understanding primordial purity, not as a dogma, not as a belief, but as the actuality of the ground of your being is very important. And because this primordial ground is not just empty, it gives a showing to or a display of unborn light and sound, which is effortlessly arising. This is called Hlundrup. This is the immediate presence of our experience moment by moment. It is seeing or opening to the primordial ground, which thins the opaque density of our ordinary perception. When this open ground is not available, then we remain trapped inside the dualistic vision that I am here, I am real, I am not you. And then it's a lot of hard work. So hopefully you start to get a sense of the outline of the actual situation we inhabit. There is the infinite, and there are many little seeming finites. Now, if you start from your ordinary sense of yourself, then it's as if you are lost in the Amazon forest. There's a lot of things, a lot of trees and creepers and so on. And it's very difficult to clear away all that is growing. You only have a blunt machete and your arm gets very tired. This is why many people come into Dharma, into Buddhism with a lot of enthusiasm, and then after some years they're very tired and don't do so much practice. How can I ever be free when my mind is full of stuff? This arises by not knowing your mind. If we go back to these 5 qualities of the ground, which is the ground of the mind itself, the third one is infinite. My mind is infinite and it's full of finites. Not a problem for the infinite, because the infinite is always bigger than the finite. And the infinite doesn't change, but the finite are always changing. So if you rest in the infinite, you see, oh, the finite arises and passes, arises and passes. In fact, when we see this in meditation, we see all finites are self-arising and self-liberating. Oh, there's space. Come, go, you're welcome. Because I am not different from primordial purity. Like with the mirror, the reflection is in the mirror, but it doesn't touch the mirror. It doesn't change the mirror. The reflection comes in easily and goes out easily and doesn't leave a trace. So this is the very, very simple point where you can see where you are in the meditation practice. If you feel personally affected with hopes or fears, whatever, this is a sign that you're in the domain or the paradigm of the ego. I feel this, where I am the one who is I, and I'm limited by this. Now, without changing anything at all, I feel this. Subject and object arise together, and they go together. They love each other. They come to the party together, they leave together. They don't go off fucking someone else. So, subject and object come, subject and object go. But I am the subject. Nah, now you're fucked. This is you identify with the small, with the finite, then you're small. Small boy, big school, you get beaten and bullied. It's just like that. So, when you start from the ego position, you always get trouble, and the journey is very long. The basis of our practice in Dzogchen is to start from the ground, and with the openness of the ground, everything is easy, because the ground doesn't need the object. we go back again to these 5 factors of the ground. The first is uncompounded. My ego self is compounded. I like and I don't like. Therefore, I try to get more of what I like and less of what I don't like. This keeps me busy. When I feel I'm getting what I don't like, this is not the same as getting what I like. One is better than the other. So in that state, although we read this word equanimity in a lot of Buddhist texts, it doesn't mean anything, because it's obvious to the ego that happiness is better than suffering. They're not the same. Why would I treat them as equal? This is the truth of the ego self. It's not that we should try to be stoical or do some ascetic practice where we don't respond to sensory stimulus. But when the mind itself is stable and calm, when the mind doesn't move, and in fact the mind itself never moves, then what moves is the movement of the mind. The mirror doesn't move, the reflection moves. Because the reflection or the image or the experience is moving, it will not remain. Therefore, it doesn't define you. And the less attachment you have and involvement in what is arising, then the liberation is cleaner and cleaner and cleaner till there is no trace at all. And this is a little bit difficult to get to. This is where we can experience that whatever comes, comes. So that the experience that I'm sad or I'm lonely or unhappy is just what it is. Then we can have the simplicity of integrity. We are neither denying how we are nor indulging it. It's just arising like this. This is a display of the ground. But the display doesn't define the ground. So if I am sad a lot of the time, then you might think, oh, James is a sad person. There is some sadness within him. That's why he's sad, because he has a sad source which feeds out this sad look on his face and so on. And so the phenomena of sadness is identified as a symptom which indicates the underlying disorder. Oh, he's sad, maybe he's depressed. But this is arising from the ground. This is just something which arises and passes. It's not establishing any truth. It is illusion, like a reflection in a mirror, like a rainbow in the sky. But I don't like it. It is real. What makes it real? The fact that I don't like it. Entering into the duality of subject and object, I, James, am persecuted by my sad feeling. This is samsara. The ego self is marked. It's like paper, you write on it. Everything marks the ego self. Awareness is like the mirror. So these two are present together. The unborn openness of the mirror and the finite shaped limitation of the ego, which is prone to feeling oppressed. They are simultaneous. So without doing anything, you find yourself in the open, because attachment is effort. Identification is effort. Disliking is effort. All positionings are effortful. You're up to something. You're involved in something. You're doing it. Don't do it. Relax. The main meditation instruction in Dzogchen is to relax. Of course, as we relax, we become aware of subtle tensions, habitual tensions which hover around. The key thing is we don't get surprised about them, just stay present with them, and they vanish. Don't try to push them away. Don't try to do anything with them. Just leave them there. Now, this is very difficult for the ego. So the ego is a belief. I exist because I believe I exist. That doesn't mean that if I stop believing that I exist, I totally vanish, because it's not the belief which gives rise to the whole of this movement that I can call myself, but it's the belief in the self which creates the density, the opacity, the seeming solidity of I, me, myself. Samsara is activity. This is what we say, it's karma. Karma means activity. The activity is generated by the belief that in order to protect myself, I have to get more of the good things and less of the bad things. And inside the vision of the ego, this is true, because the ego is a compound. It is a put together structure. When you're a child and you build a sandcastle on the beach, you have your little spade and you build it up, and then the tide starts to come in and the waves dissolve the outer wall. So you have to dig very quickly to put more sand back in to keep maintaining your sandcastle. This is what we are doing all the time. This is the work of the ego. The sea of time has already washed away your childhood. You've been digging and digging and digging, but day after day, it's washed away, washed away. And you can keep digging till you die. The benefit of Dzogchen, it shows how to take rest in the midst of the movement of the arising and passing of nothing something. Okay, so we take a break now for 1.25 hours till 3 o'clock, and then we are back again for 2 more sessions. So have a good lunch. Bye. Okay, let's start. So we can maybe just sit a little bit, just in that simple, open way. So we looked a bit at what the openness of the mind is like. And now we look a little bit at some of the problems that arise in terms of ignorance. This can be described in almost historical terms about how the 6 realms arise from ignorance. But here I want to look at it just in terms of meditation. This becomes most obvious to us when we have a moment of openness. Sometimes this arises from doing, for example, a tantric practice where you have dissolving, or it could be that you do the Guru Yoga of the White Ah, which we'll do a little bit later, in which there is a moment of release, and then it's as if there is nothing happening. So when it is as if nothing happens, then something happens. There is usually a slight experience of involvement, of not letting go. No one is particularly doing this, but there is a kind of stickiness, a basic attachment. So before there was the non-duality of appearance and emptiness. Then there was the relaxation, so that appearance just dissolved and there was only the openness or emptiness. And then in this openness, there is a somethingness. Sometimes that looks on the subject side and sometimes on the object side. That is to say, there is a kind of thisness. So this is called the ignorance of the important singularity. In Tibetan, it's called Dagni Chipo Kim Pem Maripa. And Dagni can mean like the master or the true presence of something. So it means just this. So there's a kind of surprise. And then we have to sort it out. And then we have the second level of ignorance, which is the Co Emergent Ignorance, or arising together ignorance, which means that your presence and there is nothing there, but you can tilt either way. Either you go to the density of something or the liberation of that density. And this is the point where we are easily under the power of our habits. Because the ego's quality is a sense of lack. What it lacks is authenticity. It's a pretender, an imposter. It would like to be the queen or the king, but although it maybe sits on the throne, it knows it's not legitimate. And so this sense of lack in the ego makes it always scanning the environment for danger, someone who could depose it, or something which could reinforce it or make it feel okay, that would give it a sense of being entitled. That is to say, although in non-duality, everything is arising together without any splitting, once we have this initial sense of separation, I alone, it doesn't really work. It's not enough. It's not the whole picture. As soon as I exist, you exist. A world of yous, a world of others exists. And I am tied to you. I need you and I fear you. Now, this is the ego's situation because it is part of the whole. It is not separate, autonomous, independent, but that is the feeling tone which it rests on in its sense of here I am. So in this moment of co-emergent ignorance, the arising which I actually am, that I am the display of the ground, my deepest truth is empty awareness, and the forms of my manifesting are always changing. Somehow there is something there that's not quite right. It's like if you were eating something, you eat the food and then it's gone. But at the end of the meal, you had some figs, some figs, this fruit. And then after some minutes, you're aware there's some little seeds of the fig in between your teeth. So now your tongue is going around inside your mouth, feeling these little seeds. So it's like that the arising and passing of the mental energy, some aspect of it is being diverted into a kind of whirlwind or a whirlpool. It's going round and round, and it's not rotating around anything, just like a tiny little seed. There's nothing much there. But the more you go round it and around it, this energy seems to build some importance into it. So this we can experience in the practice. The mind is a bit open, but now somehow we're getting into a preoccupation. Whatever is occurring, whether it's sensation or memory or thought, it's already shown itself, but we become convinced there's something more in there. So we don't leave it alone. It's not anything. It's like an echo. If you walk in the hills near a quarry and you make a sound, oh, and then oh. Now, you might like the sound of the echo, so you continue walking along, but going, whoa, whoa, whoa. So you become a little bit intoxicated by the movement of making this sound. It's empty of inherent significance, but the more you do it, if it takes your fancy, you just want to do it. So in that way, we seem to become focused on a particular thought. We pursue it, and as we pursue it, it's energized by our pursuit, and so thought follows thought follows thought. So on that level, there's not necessarily much conceptual activity. It's more something energetic. So for example, I was scratching my head. There's some small sensation in the skin. When I scratch it, it's kind of meaningless and meaningful. I'm not thinking about it. There's no meaning in it. Yet somehow it's quite nice to have a little scratch. So this is the energetic lock-on onto what is occurring. Then we come to the next stage, the third stage of ignorance, which is called the ignorance of naming everything. So now we're coming into adding concepts. We're making sense of what is occurring. This also helps us to justify why we're doing what we do, because it's maybe important. And if we think about it, we can develop or invent some importance for it. So the sensation maybe turns into irritation, which is an unsettled feeling. And then suddenly you find your mind has some thoughts about somebody who's done something which has upset you. And then you can have some idea about what is wrong with them. Why would they have done that kind of thing? You can be angrily accusative. You can be hurt about it. Many possibilities are there. Even if the meaning tone and the sensation is not very pleasant, somehow it seems important to be involved. So this arises from the basic tension that was happening at the beginning. As an example, if you were to take something, if you had a piece of elastic and you pull on it, the more you pull it, the more there is a resistance that wants to take your hand back. So everything is arising non-dually in emptiness. But when there is this first taking hold of something which seems to be separate and important in itself, it's on the inside, and you're trying to pull it out, but it's on the inside. So there is a tension between the fabrication of the fantasy, of the illusion, of the autonomy of this thought, memory, feeling, sensation, and its actuality, which is non-dual. So that tension could go either way. That was the second level, where it's the Co Emergent. It could go to openness or it could go to closure. But now it's getting a little bit thicker because you're massaging more concepts into it. I'm sure we all know what this is like, that in the meditation, you go off on a distraction. When you wake up from that distraction, that stream of thoughts, you don't know why you followed it, because the clarity that you have as an inspecting point of view requires a perspective. That's to say, I can see what I'm up to. So, for example, if you smoke a lot of cigarettes, you get so used to it, you take the cigarette out of the packet, have it in your mouth, and light it before you know what you're doing. But sometimes the light comes on. You're taking the cigarette out of the packet, and you think, do I need a cigarette? Why am I having another cigarette? But when you were taking it out automatically, you couldn't see that. So people often wonder, why is it I keep getting lost in the meditation? I decide I'm not going to do it. I don't feel tired. I want to maintain some clarity about what's going on. But I only know that I got lost after I find out that I've got lost. So this is very important for meditators, because the retrospective clarity, the clarity of analysis, or the clarity of being separated from what you're looking at, is not available when you are fused, because the clarity of seeing what I am doing is a dualistic clarity. It's a clarity of separation. And when you just merged into the stream of thoughts, you are in a fusion. And separation and fusion are opposites. So trying to stop fusion by separation doesn't help. For this reason, we need to learn to stay relaxed, open, and aware without either fusing or separating. This is our most basic meditation instruction. Don't go after past thoughts. Don't wait expectantly for future thoughts. Don't hold yourself apart from what is occurring like an observer. Don't merge into what is occurring so that there is no clarity. Stay present as the clarity of the space of revelation. This is a non-conceptual clarity. So when this third level of ignorance is activated, in which you are using concepts to try to make clear what is going on, you're filling the space of non-conceptual clarity with concepts. And these concepts link together one after the other in an endless chain. So that's why it's easy to get lost. Then the final level of the ignorance is the ignorance of not seeing the dullness of being immersed in karma. This operates mainly when we are not meditating, but it also arises when people are doing this basic Dzogchen sitting, when they become frustrated. You're sitting and it all seems a mess. The thought arises, I don't know what I'm doing, I'm not making any progress, this is ridiculous. This is a series of concepts. You're under the power of this third aspect of ignorance, but you now believe the concept. So, now I need to do something different. I can get up, I do some prostrations, because I know how to do prostrations. I bend, I go down, I get up, I recite my prayer. Prostrations are being done. Who is doing them? I am doing them. This is wonderful. Now I'm doing something very useful. If you ask any teacher, they say, oh yeah, why not do prostrations? Not bad. So now I'm very clear. I am doing prostrations. This is not very useful if you want to practice Dzogchen, because now you are in the realm of holy duality, sacred duality. It must be important to do because it's in the house of Dharma. Who is doing prostrations? I am doing them. Who are you? I'm the one doing the prostrations. You see, this is how you go mad. You don't know who you are. So this is where karma comes in, because, sorry, on you go. With the intention to do something of value, you decide to do something which has formal value. Clean 100,000 butter lamps. Polish the floor in the Gompa. Who is doing it? Samsara is doing this activity. You are lost because you're telling yourself a story about who you are and why you're doing what you do. You're wrapped in a cocoon of concepts and ideas. And the terrible thing about this is that the staleness, the oldness, the familiarity of the concept is what makes it feel real and true. But awareness is always fresh. It's naked, it's not covered by anything. It has no history. It's not building up pictures. It's not developing a narrative, a story. It just is. Revealing whatever arises and letting go of whatever is passing. So the danger for meditators is to doubt the clarity of the teaching, to not trust the natural purity of the mind, but becoming frustrated with what is arising in the mind because it doesn't have the qualities you would like it to have. You then try to make it the way you want it, which is self-referential. So there you can see these four kinds of ignorance are just like a little mouse on a wheel going round and round. It doesn't go anywhere. A lot of work is going on. The wheel is turning, but you stay inside samsara. So we have to remember the mind, my mind, not my ego's notion of the mind, but my mind. Because I'm here, I have a mind. It doesn't belong to the ego. Mind is here. Here, this mind is uncompounded. It just is. It is infinite. Okay, so my mind is infinite. And the thought or sensation arises, and I think this small little thing, this is the meaning of life. I have to have it. So you abandon your kingdom to be a beggar in a foreign land. And a beggar has to take whatever they get. This is what we do, wandering in samsara. So back in the practice, we sit open with whatever occurs. So the simplest way that we do this is through the Guru Yoga of the White Ah. This is a very well-known practice, and it's a means of relaxing into how it is. When you do a tantric practice, you are using imagination to dissolve imagination. Because you are asleep in the dream of samsara, when you practice Tantra, you enter the dream of the mandala. And by doing the developing and completing phases again and again, you see, oh, this is what a dissolving of imagination is. And that actually, when I walk down the street, I imagine the tree, I imagine the red car, I imagine the blue car, I imagine the lady with the dog. These are transient experiences arising within the mandala of the mind. Then we see, oh, everything I see is Padmasambhava, appearance and emptiness. So there you use imagination as the antidote for imagination. But here in Dzogchen, we don't do that because everything has been imagined, and that is an activity. We make the sound of ah and release all the stresses and tensions of body, speech, and mind so that we're not in active mode at all. And when there is no focused activity, the imagination is not generating anything. Then we're just present in this naked, open way with the freshness of whatever comes and goes. Okay, so we sit in a relaxed, comfortable way, always letting the muscles relax so the spine carries the weight of the head, shoulders drop and open, and just breathing very easily with the diaphragm. The doors of the senses are open. We're not trying to create a barrier between inside myself and what seems outside in the world. All experience, whether we call it inside or outside, arises together. And we imagine in the space in front of us, about 2 arms lengths ahead of us, is small white letter R surrounded by 5 colored light. The white R represents emptiness, the basic quality of the ground, the primordial purity of the mind, and the 5 rays of light represent the potential of the ground manifesting effortlessly, instantly, in terms of the 5 elements, the 5 wisdoms, the 5 poisons, the 5 skandhas. Everything arises from emptiness. It arises from emptiness, in emptiness, as emptiness. Therefore, don't say, oh, the 5 wisdoms are better than the 5 poisons. Not thinking Buddhas are better than sentient beings. When we organize things into a hierarchy, then we are the prisoners of conceptualization. Whatever comes, comes. Whatever goes, goes. So we make the sound of ah together 3 times. And then at the end, as the last sound vanishes, the white ah that we've just been resting our attention on dissolves in the space. Now it's open space and silence and everything moving through this. Okay, so we do this together. Okay. So, as many of you know, this is a practice that we do frequently, but for short periods of time, because effort is not helpful. Effort means making something happen. And as we looked before, there is then a doer of the deed and a result of a deed. So we're going to have a break in a moment. And if you want to make a cup of tea, there are many things you have to do. You have to boil the water, get the cup, get the tea, and so on. If you don't carry out these activities, you just have cold water, and putting the tea leaves in cold water, it's not going to be very tasty. The hot tea is not the same as cold water and tea leaves. It is transformed, compounded. The tea and the tea leaves have been brought together in a way that generates something new. This is not what we want to do in the meditation. In the text, they always talk about our original nature or our original face. Means how it is from the very beginning, unchanged from the very beginning. This is also the meaning of Vajra, indestructible, means it's always the same. So clearly in the meditation, if we want to open ourselves to find our non-duality with that which has been there from the very beginning, then we should not be altering things and changing them. To find the unchanging, we need to be unchanging. So however it is, let it be, without entering into judgment, without trying to adapt and alter how things are. Then our mind, which is open and relaxed and inactive, is very, very close to the unchanging ground. And then we find the non-duality. Okay, so we take a break now for 20 minutes, and then we have our final session for the day. Good. Okay, shall we start? So, all that we've covered today is held in the Dzogchen tradition in these 3 aspects of our mind. The first is the essence or the true face of the mind, which is emptiness. And the second aspect is its quality or display, which is clarity. And its third aspect is energy or manifestation or compassion, which is all pervading. So, for example, our mind is like the sky. You can't find the top or the bottom of the sky. It's very familiar, but we don't really know what it is. So our mind is like this, an open space that we're, in a sense, we are living and moving within our mind the way we move within space. Then into the sky arises the sun. The sun illuminates everything. So the sun is like the symbol for Rigpa or awareness. Light radiates and touches everything, and this is what we encounter. It is the light of the mind. Now, we might say, oh, but we know that light comes from outside into our eyes. But as we've been looking, in emptiness, there is no inside and outside, no self and other. So sometimes awareness looks outside, sometimes it looks inside. Sometimes it looks like self, sometimes it looks like other. So when the rays of the sun touch a surface, it becomes visible. It is illuminated, and so we see it clearly. This is an instant or immediate clarity. It's not built up bit by bit, but arrives just like this. So when you look around, look out the window, maybe go for a walk later, everything which is arising is the clarity of the mind, instantly revealed. So to continue this image, the rays of the light don't just have illuminating power, but they bring heat as well. Heat is transformative and makes things happen. So this is the quality of energy or compassion or participation. That is to say, we are moved to connect. And when our connectivity arises from inside the practice, it's not me connecting with you, because we are already connected. We are already emerging from the same ground. So it's not that we have to work out how to connect, but we allow ourselves to follow the energy or the pattern of the connectivity. This connectivity is like water. It flows, it finds its way, it takes the easy path. When the water in a river flows over the rocks, it's very intimate, it's very close with the rock, but it's not invasive. In the same way, we should be available for contact with people according to what co-emerges in the space of connectivity. This means that when we move towards other people or with other people, we don't do it from an agenda, some plan of what we're going to do or say. But if we are open and available, this first aspect of the mind as open and empty, and our awareness is bright, everything is illuminated, so then you see how it is. And then you go forward or back according to how it is. One of the great difficulties we have in communicating with other living creatures is that we don't allow them to show how they are. The showing of the other allows us to come to meet them where they are. That is to say, the energy that we receive from the other person allows us to move energetically towards them. In general terms, that means we're not trying to save them, we're not trying to teach them Dharma, but we respond. So the teaching things that I do around, people ask me, will you come and do this? And I say, okay. I'm not sitting at home thinking, oh God, I'm so bored. If only somebody would invite me to go and talk. If Dharma was like that, then it would be driven by an egocentric necessity. What we need is to have a basic equanimity, which is like an indifference. Doing it is fine, not doing it is fine. If we're doing it, then that's great. If not, it's okay. That way we remain balanced, grounded, open, and able to respond. Because desire and aversion are very close to each other. When we have a desire and we want something to happen, we find ourselves coming into a shape. And if that shaping is frustrated by the unavailability of the other, we get annoyed or angry. It's not that we should never have any desire or aversion. When they are fresh, they are simply pulsations. You know, we can rock forward, we rock back, forward and back. It's not a big difficulty to go back if you've been forward. But, but if you lock forward, if you're determined to get something, then frustration is likely to increase if it's blocked. So this means we have to be ready to respond and respond into the emerging situation. So, for example, in the tantric tradition, we have the practice of initiations or empowerments for practices. These are rituals which can be elaborate or simple. They can last a short time or many days. But there's always an initiation text that tells the teacher what to do, which kind of tormas to have, which kind of symbols to show, and so on. It is an exercise in choreography. You know in advance what you're going to do. Some modification can, of course, be made according to circumstances, but generally, you know what's going to happen. But for many people, their life is not like a ritual. It's not knowable in advance. You have to find your way. You don't know what to say. So sometimes this is a cause of anxiety. There's a tension inside. Will I get it right? Will I upset them? And so on. This kind of anxiety often arises because we have made the situation too important. If you are a surgeon doing a heart transplant, it helps if you know the standard procedures and you know what to do if it starts to go wrong. But we're not living like that in an operating theater. In the operating theater, they control the number of variables which can arise. Everybody is sterilized and so on. When we engage with other people, we don't know how they're going to be. And that's why rocking is very, very important. Rocking forward and back is a pulsation. Breathing in and out is a pulsation. Our heartbeat is a pulsation. Life is a pulsation. So, retreating, apologizing, finding a new way is not a big issue. However, if you feel that you have to be right, then it's more difficult. Many politicians tell many, many lies because they always have to pretend to be right. Because that's the theater that we believe our leader is a wonderful person who doesn't make mistakes. We know it's not true, but we get angry if they tell the truth and say, I really fucked up. These are people trapped in a theatrical role because they have cooked up other people's expectations. So we are lucky people. We're not like that. We're ordinary people. We're not famous. We go and stand in the queue in the supermarket. We take our place in the world, which means we have to see what place is available for us. So advancing and retreating is part of how we place ourselves in interactions with others. It's very good to become more flexible so that we remain soft and pliable. In the tantric text, when they describe the body of, for example, Chenrezig, his body is described as pliable, soft and bendable, because he's ready to stand up and move forward and get into the dance of whatever is occurring. That is to say, he allows himself to be positioned according to circumstances. The same with the 21 forms of the goddess Tara. She manifests these forms according to circumstances. She can't get up in the morning and think, oh yes, today I'm going to wear this tiara. She appears as required. Tara doesn't have any shape or form. Tara is the potential of the mind of the Buddha, the potential of the Dharmakaya. But she manifests in many, many different forms. When we say 21 Taras, it could be 10 million Taras. She's not limited by any depiction, any description of her dress or her color, because compassion is for the other, but for the other who is not an object. In the general teachings in Buddhism, we say, may all beings be happy. May they gain enlightenment. And we say, I will help them to get to enlightenment. I will lead them there. These are people who are not in enlightenment and need to be taken to enlightenment. But in Dzogchen, the ground is infinite. There is nothing outside the ground. Everything which arises is already within the unbroken sphere or the unbroken tigli of emptiness. There is no one to be saved. The belief that there are people to be saved is a delusion arising from ignorance of the ground. So we are concerned with the absolute truth, bodhicitta, or the bodhicitta, or the compassion which doesn't take any object. There is no one to be saved and no one to do the saving. We are here in this luminous world. Everyone is moving. Dogs, cats, birds, people. Where are they? They are here and not here. They are here because they are here. But they're not here because they are in their interpretation and commentary about being here. What stands between them and the immediacy of their own awakening? This is their belief that their own thoughts, their own impulses, their own instincts tell them the truth about how it is. They believe, they don't look. With the practice of Dzogchen, we relax, we open, we're here, and we see. How is it? Seeing how it is not an interpretation. You don't need any concepts. If you're doing some relaxed improvisation work of body or making sounds together, you don't need to have a big theory. You don't need to know what's going to happen. Being relaxed, open, and present allows the energy which you are, which manifests as you, to move with the energy that's all around you. These have never been two separate arenas of energy. You've always been part from the inside. So what separates us is our own false interpretation, which we looked at just before in terms of these four aspects of ignorance. When we process experience through this central point of I am, I exist, then it is as if the value of everything is determined by how it stands in relation to me. Do I like it? Do I not like it? This is a veil and a filter. If we want to see, we have to let the light in. We have to be available to receive the world, which means not to be selective, not to go out with some shopping list, but just to see how is it, and then respond into that. When we practice in this way, we are not making any distinction between self and other. What is arising is self-other, or me world. Me and the world is always together. Even if you're asleep, you're in the bed. You are inside. So live inside. Then you have the compassion of seeing how people create suffering from themselves by imagining they are outside, by imagining that they are separate, they are held apart, that they need to think about how to join in. From the very beginning, everything which occurs is complete within the heart of Samantabhadra. There are no real entities. There are no self-existing things. The forms of the world have qualities of hardness, weight, and so on, according to the patterning of the 5 elements. Everything changes through interaction. So compassion in Dzogchen is not to exclude anyone. The great completion of Dzogchen means inclusive. Everything we experience is a form of the ground. This is how the ground manifests. And the more you release yourself from the prefiguring fixation of your own thoughts, habits, and beliefs, you find something interesting. The ground source of everything doesn't conform to your ego fantasy. How amazing. You are not the queen of the world. You are in the world, but not in charge. There is a dog. The dog has a tail. If the dog wags the tail, then everything is okay. But if the tail wags the dog, then it's not so good. The ego is only the tail. We are not so big, not so important. We work with circumstances. We are not insignificant. We are infinite and empty. We are the ground basis of the whole field of everything we experience. But in the manifestation, in this energetic embodiment, there are limitations of health, age, gender, and so on. And so, not too big, not too small. Simply as it is, as I am, as you are, as the situation is. So I hope you can see this is exactly the continuation of the meditation instruction. Don't go after past thoughts. Don't wait expectantly for future thoughts. So if you don't go after past thoughts, you don't develop your definite knowledge about who the other person is or how they are. And if you don't wait for the future, if you're not planning into the future, imagining how it's going to be, then you open a space for the other person to show themselves. Once you have a sense of how they are, you can respond. In this way, compassion arises from not knowing. When you know, you become the expert. And experts are always prisoners of choreography. So, again and again, we do our simple practice. We can do it sitting down. We can do it when we go for a walk. You just stop for a few minutes, relax in and out breath. You don't need to make any sound, and just there. Of course, the ego always asks the question, what is here? Why am I looking? But we need to trust our awareness. Awareness receives and displays. It shows how it is. It's like this. Okay, then we proceed. The world doesn't need your story. And especially you don't need your story. Many people live inside the prison of the story their parents told them about who they are. Or they live in the story of their parents' marriage. And through that, they imagine that there are many things they just could not do. Who couldn't do it? I couldn't do it. I couldn't say that. So we come back again and again to the question, who is the one who is captured by the idea, I couldn't do it? The ground basis of the mind is infinite, and you squeeze yourself into a tiny cube 1 centimeter in size. I couldn't do it because I am me. But who are you? I'm the one that couldn't do it. This is a slightly circular logic. It belongs to the class we call stupid. We are infinitely open. Everything we encounter arises freshly for our eyes, our ears. Within this wondrous luminous field, we are moving as if in a mandala of crystal. If you stay present, that's what you will see. Patternings of color and sound within which you are moving, manifesting your own patterns of color and sound. Nothing is fixed, except when it's caught by a thought. Oh, I couldn't do it. How strongly and deeply you limit yourself. Our great Dzogchen guru Namkhai Norbu said again and again, don't limit yourself. You limit yourself by believing that you are your self-construct. Look at the self-construct. Take some paper and write down your core beliefs about yourself. People don't like me, or men only like me for sex. Whatever your belief about yourself, write it down and look, oh, this is a belief. I believe this. And then reflect on your history in this life, your family, your grandparents, your school, and so on. And then you can see with this understanding of dependent co-origination that due to circumstances, this pattern of belief, this pattern of behavior came to feel like me. Every day we see people doing things that we don't feel we could do. How is this possible? They are not living in the same prison as you. They have their own prison. Some prisons only have a cold stone floor, some have central heating. Everyone's imprisoned inside some structure of belief. And beliefs work because you believe in them. As we looked earlier, that is an activity. You have to keep repeating it for it to seem to be true. It's not true. But functionally, it is true if you believe in it. What does that mean? So, I was saying one of the ways we can translate tukje, which generally means compassion, is to say it describes energy. So energy is like electricity or water running down a hill. When they're building a house, the electricians come in and they put in the plugs and so on around the house. This directs the number of electric goods you can have functioning in a room at any one time. So you move into that flat and you find out where the plugs are. You find out where the line for the computer is coming into the house. So you want to have your computer near to the router point. The room itself has a lot of possibilities, but how you situate your table and chair and so on are directed by the availability of electric power. So you can observe for yourself how in your childhood, your parents and teachers were like electricians. They wired the pathways of the flow of your energy so that you can move more easily in some directions than in others. This is not intrinsic. It is not from the beginning, from the ground. This is compounded, constructed, a product of your parents' neurotic structures, the culture they grew up in, the cultural time you were growing up in, and so on. This is your karma. It's not about blaming your parents, but realizing that the Buddha is the master electrician. He can rewire your house very easily. So don't imprison yourself in the structures you inherit. If you go to the ground, everything is fresh. Not just every day, but every moment is a new beginning. Then you start to trust your intuition, your spontaneity. You find that creativity flows through you, and so you can relate easily to other people. This is, as far as I know, the easiest and simplest way to release tension. Don't set up polarities, either or, delinquent or compliant, generous or selfish. Rather stay with both and, because all the points of all the polarities can be useful in certain situations. If you remember, we started with the image of being in the Amazon jungle with a blunt machete. If you believe that thoughts and feelings and sensations are real and you try to cut them up and shape them the way you want, you will never win. The jungle is manifesting out of the ground. Don't look at the trees, they are so big, they will scare you. Look at the ground. You are standing on the ground. The ground is already supporting you. You are the child of emptiness. So everything is empty. This is your mandala and you belong within it. So our time together is coming towards an end. When we're doing this work together on Skype or on Zoom, it's a little bit still for me somewhat strange, but I think it's a very good idea if it interests you to maybe join some study group together. If I'm teaching something, I like to keep a very clear, constant line to make it as comprehensible as possible. For that reason, I don't take questions very often, as they tend to go off in all different directions and not have very much to do with the main topic. But if you have specific questions, I'm willing to respond to them as long as you make them very precise. And you can send them to me through the website. Stumbling around in the dark is not good, but when you get a little bit of light, make sure you use it well. So we've covered a lot of ground today. I hope it's useful. And I would like to thank Bartek for his translation. I find it very easy to work with Bartek because it flows along just very smoothly. And of course, thank you to our three shining Brazilians, Milton, João, and Pedro, who make the recording and the production of today possible. So we have another event with just Italian translation in a couple of weeks, and then one day only in English in June. And then at the beginning of July, we will have 2 days, a Saturday and a Sunday, working on the famous text, Pato Rinpoche's commentary on the 3 statements of Garab Dorje. So we will have that available in translation in English, German, Spanish, and Portuguese. So you get the details on the events page of the Simply Being website. So, pleasure to see you all, and I wish you good practice and good study. So, bye for now.
Right.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for everything.
Bye.
Everyone. Good to have you here.
Bye, bye, bye.
Bye bye, everybody. Bye bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.